Detective James Carter arrived in the small town of Silverton under a cloud of uncertainty. The town, usually tranquil and untroubled, was now shrouded in fear. Recent events had cast a dark shadow over the community, a series of disappearances that left the residents anxious and disoriented. The latest to vanish was a young woman named Sarah Lynch, whose mysterious disappearance had left the town reeling. Sarah was well known in Silverton for her vibrant personality and her involvement in local charities. Her absence created a palpable void, and the town's sense of security was shattered. The local police were struggling to find leads, and the case was beginning to grow cold. The town's mayor, Henry Collins, had called for outside help, which led to Carter's arrival. With a reputation for solving complex cases, Carter was expected to bring clarity to the situation. From the moment he stepped off the train, Carter noticed the tension in the air. The streets were unusually quiet, and the residents seemed to avoid eye contact. He was greeted by the town's chief of police, Robert Davis, who appeared visibly distressed. Davis briefed Carter on the situation, outlining the key facts. Sarah Lynch had last been seen leaving a local cafe, and no one had seen or heard from her since. The investigation so far had yielded little information, and there were no apparent clues or witnesses. Carter began his investigation by visiting Sarah's last known whereabouts. The cafe was a charming place, with a cozy atmosphere and a friendly staff. The owner, Mrs. Evelyn Turner, recalled Sarah's visit but could not provide any useful details. Sarah had been in high spirits that day, discussing plans for a community event she was organizing. There was no indication that anything was amiss. The detective then turned his attention to Sarah's home. Her apartment was neatly arranged, and there were no signs of a struggle. Personal belongings were in their place, and her car was parked outside. Carter discovered that Sarah had been receiving anonymous phone calls in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. The calls were brief and cryptic, and Sarah had not shared their contents with anyone. As Carter delved deeper into Sarah's life, he began to uncover some intriguing details. It appeared that Sarah had been involved with William Grayson, a wealthy and influential businessman in Silverton. Grayson was known for his charm and success, but Carter sensed that there was more to his story. Grayson was seen as a pillar of the community, but there were whispers of a hidden side to his persona. The detective arranged to meet with Grayson, who welcomed him with an air of confidence. Grayson was polite but guarded, and Carter noted that his responses to questions about Sarah were evasive. The businessman claimed to have had no contact with Sarah in recent weeks, but Carter found this hard to believe. There was a subtle tension in Grayson's demeanor that suggested he was hiding something. Despite his initial impressions, Carter could not afford to jump to conclusions. He needed to gather more evidence and speak with other potential witnesses. The town of Silverton was small, and information often traveled quickly. Carter hoped that by understanding the dynamics of the community and its key players, he could uncover the truth behind Sarah's disappearance. The detective's investigation continued, but the sense of dread among the townsfolk grew with each passing day. The pressure on Carter was mounting, and he knew that time was of the essence. As he worked to unravel the mystery, he was keenly aware that the answers he sought might be more elusive and complex than he had anticipated. The shadows of deceit were beginning to loom large over Silverton, and Carter was determined to bring them into the light. Detective James Carter's investigation into the disappearance of Sarah Lynch had just begun to peel back the layers of mystery that shrouded the small town of Silverton. As he delved deeper, he unearthed a web of deception that seemed to entwine the town's prominent figures, with the enigmatic businessman William Grayson at its center. Carter's initial inquiries revealed that Grayson was not only a successful entrepreneur but also an influential figure with connections that reached deep into the town's social and economic fabric. Despite his public image as a benefactor and a pillar of the community, Grayson's past and present actions hinted at a more complex and potentially darker reality. Carter noted that Grayson's interactions with Sarah Lynch had been closely scrutinized, as it was becoming increasingly apparent that their relationship was more intricate than initially thought. Sarah had been seen in Grayson's company on several occasions, and their association seemed to go beyond mere acquaintance. Eyewitnesses reported that Sarah and Grayson had been involved in clandestine meetings, and their conversations had often been heated. Carter's interviews with local residents and business associates started to paint a picture of a relationship fraught with tension and conflict. Some spoke of Sarah's recent attempts to distance herself from Grayson, suggesting that there had been underlying issues that had come to a head. The detective's investigation took an unexpected turn when he discovered that Sarah had been working on a project that directly impacted Grayson's interests. Sarah had been spearheading an initiative to reform zoning laws in Silverton, which would have affected Grayson's lucrative real estate ventures. Carter found out that this project had brought Sarah into direct conflict with Grayson, who stood to lose significant financial gain if the reforms were enacted. This conflict added a new dimension to the case, presenting a potential motive for Grayson. Carter's suspicions about Grayson grew stronger, but he was aware that concrete evidence was needed to support any allegations. The detective turned his attention to Grayson's business dealings, hoping to find a link between the businessman's financial interests and Sarah's disappearance. As he sifted through financial records and business transactions, Carter discovered discrepancies that hinted at possible corruption and illicit activities. Simultaneously, Carter's focus also shifted to Daniel Reed, a close friend of Sarah's who had recently come under suspicion. Daniel, a quiet and reserved individual, had been notably absent from many discussions about Sarah's disappearance. His behavior raised red flags, particularly his inability to provide a coherent account of his whereabouts on the day Sarah went missing. Carter discovered that Daniel had been unusually defensive when questioned about his interactions with Sarah, and his alibi for the day in question seemed questionable. Intriguingly, Daniel had been seen in Grayson's vicinity on several occasions, though there was no clear evidence linking him directly to the businessman. Carter learned that Daniel had been struggling with personal and financial issues, which might have provided him with a motive to become involved in Sarah's disappearance. Despite this, Carter found it difficult to draw direct connections between Daniel's actions and the case. As Carter continued his investigation, the web of deceit began to unravel, revealing a pattern of manipulation and hidden agendas. The detective realized that both Grayson and Daniel were key players in this complex narrative, each with their own motives and secrets. The intertwining of their stories made it clear that the truth behind Sarah Lynch's disappearance was likely to be far more convoluted than initially anticipated. With the discovery of new leads and potential suspects, Carter was determined to uncover the full extent of the deception at play. The more he learned, the more it became evident that Sarah's disappearance was part of a much larger and darker scheme. The town of Silverton, once a picture of idyllic simplicity, was now a battleground of lies and hidden motives. Carter knew that in order to solve the case, he would need to navigate this treacherous web with caution and precision, seeking out the truth amidst the tangled threads of deceit. Detective James Carter's investigation into Sarah Lynch's disappearance had begun to expose the dark underbelly of Silverton. As he pursued leads and gathered evidence, the complexity of the case became more apparent. The intertwined lives of William Grayson and Daniel Reed seemed to form a critical part of the puzzle, but Carter realized that the true threat might be lurking even deeper within the shadows. The more Carter delved into Daniel Reed's background, the more he discovered about his past grievances and potential motives. Daniel had once been a promising student, but a series of personal setbacks and financial troubles had caused him to fall out of favor with his friends and the community. His relationship with Sarah Lynch had been one of the few constants in his troubled life, and he had harbored feelings for her that went beyond friendship. Carter's investigation revealed that Daniel had been deeply envious of Sarah's involvement with Grayson, whose influence and wealth had always seemed out of reach for him. Carter began to suspect that Daniel might have acted out of jealousy or desperation. He found that Daniel had been seen near Grayson's property several times in the days leading up to Sarah's disappearance. This was particularly troubling, given that Daniel's statements about his whereabouts on the day of Sarah's last sighting were inconsistent. Daniel had claimed to have been at home, but witnesses placed him in the vicinity of Grayson's estate. Carter's team began to scrutinize Daniel's financial records and personal communications, looking for any signs of collusion or direct involvement with Grayson. However, the investigation took another unexpected turn when Carter uncovered a series of encrypted messages on Daniel's phone. The messages were sent by an unknown contact and contained cryptic references to his final plan and secrets that must remain hidden. The content of these messages suggested that Daniel might have been manipulated or coerced into playing a role in Sarah's disappearance. This new evidence raised the possibility that Daniel was not the mastermind but rather a pawn in a larger scheme. As Carter focused on Daniel, he also continued to probe into William Grayson's activities. The detective discovered that Grayson had been involved in a covert operation involving illegal land deals and bribery. Grayson's company had been accused of exploiting local resources and undermining community projects for personal gain. Sarah's reform efforts had posed a direct threat to these illicit operations, making her a target. Grayson's initial attempts to distance himself from Sarah's case appeared to be a strategic move to avoid suspicion. Carter's investigation revealed a troubling pattern: Grayson's business dealings had connections to organized crime. The deeper he dug, the more he found evidence of a secret network operating behind the scenes. This network was involved in a range of criminal activities, including money laundering and extortion. Carter suspected that Grayson might have had ties to this network, which could explain the lengths he was willing to go to in order to keep Sarah from interfering with his plans. With these revelations, Carter began to piece together a more comprehensive picture of the case. He realized that Sarah's disappearance was not merely a result of a personal conflict between her and Grayson, but was instead part of a broader criminal conspiracy. The encrypted messages found on Daniel's phone suggested that he was being used as a tool to further the objectives of this hidden network, possibly under duress or manipulation. Carter's growing understanding of the situation made it clear that the real enemy was an elusive and powerful entity operating behind the scenes. The investigation needed to focus not only on Grayson and Daniel but also on uncovering the full extent of this shadowy organization. The detective was determined to bring all the pieces of the puzzle together, understanding that the key to solving Sarah's disappearance lay in exposing the hidden forces at play. The town of Silverton had become a battleground of deceit, with layers of betrayal and hidden agendas complicating the investigation. Carter knew that the stakes were high, and the path to the truth would be fraught with danger. As he prepared for the next phase of his investigation, he remained resolute in his mission to unravel the web of lies and uncover the identity of the true mastermind behind the sinister plot that had ensnared Sarah Lynch. Detective James Carter's investigation had reached a critical juncture. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, and the tangled web of deceit that had enshrouded Silverton was slowly being unraveled. As Carter drew closer to the truth, he faced the daunting task of exposing the true mastermind behind Sarah Lynch's disappearance and the shadowy organization that had manipulated the key players in this complex case. Carter's breakthrough came when he managed to decrypt the messages found on Daniel Reed's phone. The messages revealed a shocking connection between William Grayson and a criminal syndicate known for its involvement in high-level corruption and organized crime. The syndicate's leader, a figure known only as the Shadow, had orchestrated the series of events leading up to Sarah's disappearance. Grayson, it turned out, had been a key player in the syndicate's operations, using his influence to further their illicit activities. The detective discovered that Sarah's attempts to expose Grayson's illegal dealings had posed a serious threat to the Shadow's plans. Sarah had been gathering evidence that could bring down not only Grayson but also the entire criminal network. In response, the Shadow had orchestrated her abduction to prevent her from revealing the truth. Daniel Reed, while not the mastermind, had been coerced into assisting in the plan. His role was to keep a close watch on Sarah and report her movements, unwittingly aiding the syndicate in their scheme. Carter's investigation also revealed that Grayson's public persona as a philanthropist and successful businessman had been a facade to cover his criminal activities. The townspeople had been blinded by his charm and influence, unable to see the darker side of his operations. Grayson had used his position to manipulate local officials and maintain control over the town's affairs. His involvement with the Shadow was part of a larger strategy to maintain power and avoid detection. With this new understanding, Carter knew that he needed to act swiftly to bring the criminals to justice. He coordinated with federal authorities to stage a raid on Grayson's estate and uncover further evidence of the criminal network's operations. The operation was executed with precision, and several key figures in the syndicate were apprehended. Grayson, realizing that his empire was collapsing, attempted to flee but was apprehended before he could escape. During the raid, Carter's team discovered a hidden chamber in Grayson's mansion. Inside, they found crucial evidence, including documents detailing the syndicate's activities and a recording of a conversation between Grayson and the Shadow. The recording revealed the Shadow's true identity, a former high-ranking government official who had used their position to orchestrate the syndicate's operations. This revelation was a major breakthrough, exposing the depth of corruption that had plagued Silverton and beyond. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Carter managed to locate Sarah Lynch. She had been held captive in a remote location by the syndicate, but she was alive and well. The rescue operation was successful, and Sarah was reunited with her family. Her bravery and determination to uncover the truth had played a crucial role in dismantling the criminal network. In the aftermath of the investigation, Silverton began the process of healing and rebuilding. The town's residents were shocked by the extent of the corruption that had been hidden from them for so long. The exposure of Grayson and the Shadow's crimes led to significant reforms and a renewed sense of vigilance within the community. Detective Carter's work was far from over, but he had achieved a significant victory. The case had not only brought justice for Sarah Lynch but also exposed a network of deceit and corruption that had threatened the very fabric of the town. As he prepared to move on to his next assignment, Carter reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The shadows of deceit had been brought to light, and the truth had triumphed over the forces of darkness.